Hello. In this short presentation, I want to look at what it means to be fully present, a practice that is foundational to my work as an artist. I will then discuss what we put at risk when we shortchange this process. In doing this, I want to show how, by being present, we not only open ourselves to experience beauty all around us, we develop the capacity to navigate change. Would we have fallen out of relationship with the earth if we hadn't forgotten how to recognize beauty? What do I mean by that? As we don't exist outside of our culture, we need to accept that the current system is us. It's all the unexamined assumptions we make daily. No one wants to perpetuate the dysfunction we see over there. However, by our very participation in society, we unwittingly perpetuate the culture we are in, unless we can find ways to become more conscious of our actions. Thus, building in mechanisms for deeper reflection are more critical now than ever before. I wonder if we haven't reduced too much in our lives to an abstraction of the real thing. When COVID struck, we seemed more able to see clearly what mattered most. Our material bucket list of wants receded into the background as relationship, connection, and those things that give us a sense of well-being were suddenly threatened. Thus, how we perceive the world matters, as it creates the context from which we make decisions and form our assumptions. Most people, when they experience life-altering events, know that life should never be reduced to a series of abstractions from which we are disconnected as co-creators. We clearly know that a virtual Zoom hug doesn't substitute for a real hug. However, during business as usual, the pace of our modern Western lifestyles appears to be driving us ever closer to a reductionist abstraction of disconnected parts. What do I mean by that? Whether we consider the concept of money, which is an abstraction of the value of something, or the market-based economy, which is an abstraction of the value of whole sectors, or the abstraction of language, chronological time, symbol, or myth, society abstracts meaning from real things in order to communicate, and because we are conscious beings seeking to create meaning. I'm not arguing that abstraction isn't a necessary part of being conscious, for it allows us to understand one another and operate with greater efficiency. But it should never be confused with the real thing from which it was derived. For the danger is, when we rely too heavily on abstraction, it can obscure our ability to recognize the real thing. Art involves so much more than an exploration of ideas. For me, creating art involves not only play, but it requires me to be fully present to the flow, balance, and dynamism or energy created by all the interacting parts of an art piece. It is one of the most exhausting activities I do because it requires all my attention at a multi-sensory level for sustained periods. With art, there is no roadmap, no set of instructions to tell me which color, shape, or proportion to choose. In order to find the right balance and meaning, it requires that I am fully present. It's not just my eyes that help me to know where to put the next brush stroke or a piece of fabric or the next stitch. It is all of my senses working together. Additionally, I find that it is not always helpful to look at an art piece straight on in order to figure out the next step. Often it is more useful to use techniques that allow me to use my peripheral vision or that reduce the visible details, such as partially closing my eyes so that only the dominant shapes are visible, or turning the work upside down to distract from the literal details. In this way, creating art, as with anything that involves creativity, requires a dynamic responsiveness to all of the parts, as every new addition or subtraction changes the proportion and balance of the whole. Anyone working creatively has to draw on an inner compass to discern the next steps. Like I said, there is no roadmap. Not only that, it also requires a level of courage, an inner confidence to follow that intuitive response, knowing that we bring knowledge that is unique to us and that cannot be outsourced. even when we doubt our own abilities. Thus, whether it is cutting into a precious piece of fabric that may not work with the rest of the piece, and therefore may be wasted, or an early explorer setting out on a voyage of discovery in uncharted territory, there is always risk. Over time, I have learned to calm my fears and self-doubt that inevitably surface to intrude in the art-making process. In fact, what I now know is that creativity requires me to simply show up with an attitude of openness and responsiveness, and to trust the process, even when I feel wholly inadequate. What if I make a fool of myself? What if I haven't done justice to the topic or subject I'm tackling in my art? When we are fully present and open, the authenticity of something can shine through, even if much of that thing still remains hidden. Recognizing something as true cannot be abstracted, as it has a relationship component to it that involves us personally. As a community artist, one of the greatest joys is being part of a process where others recognize the resonance of something truthful and authentic. When this authenticity is captured in an art piece, that piece becomes a powerful touchstone for a community's commonly held beliefs and identity. This shared enjoyment helps to connect us not only to each other, but to the world we share. To me, this shared delight gets at the essence of beauty. Thus, to me, real beauty is a dynamic, relational experience that can best be discovered when we are fully present. Almost everything else is a proxy. Symbolism, including images and abstractions that are didactic and enforced through cultural pressure, have often confused me because there is no room for curiosity, contradiction, paradox, or even humor. These abstractions too often narrow down the meaning of something, often making that concept unrecognizable to those who are open and paying attention. When powerful and socially dominant symbols and abstractions become unrecognizable, something tangible and accessible to us gets lost and makes it much harder for us to navigate dynamic new information, which often comes in the form of seemingly inconsequential, ordinary details that are all too readily dismissed. The danger is that people become vulnerable to propaganda and distorted or false narratives because they have not learned to trust their own ability to value those details. I believe that symbols, stories, myths, and abstractions embedded in our lives need to evolve coherently. If what we abstract is not dependent on a continual process of reflection and adjustment, it will require increasing amounts of control and domination to maintain social narratives dependent on that abstraction. This is because, as cracks appear in the accepted narrative, with no process to effectively address growing inconsistencies, more energy needs to be spent band-aiding those cracks. This approach contradicts the continually regenerating autopoietic process of life itself. I explore this understanding in this piece titled Dominion Deconstructing. I believe that one of the most productive things we can do within complex social systems is to create the conditions for emergence. For when we try to design system solutions without a continual flow of feedback from the whole system, we get it wrong, because a large dynamic system is too complex to adhere to static, imposed narratives. In this piece, Dancing into Being, I wanted to create an artistic exploration of the emerging scientific understanding of a living universe. I attempted to explore how these relatively new scientific insights affect our personal experience of consciousness, especially our perceptions around the interconnection with all life. I am fascinated by the fact that in a living, continually changing universe, there is a constant flow of energy. Nothing is fixed or static or solid. New life is continually coming into being, a cosmic dance that we are all linked to and co-creators with. This art piece is a celebration of new life, of breaking out of old paradigms that cling to a dead, static universe to embrace the living. To conclude, if we are to take these understandings seriously, the wisdom from within the system needs the space to emerge. How do we do that? How do we design continually renewing processes that are reflected in our narratives and abstractions? I believe it starts by requiring us to practice being present. If we did this regularly, the beauty and love that permeates life would shine through, continually reminding us that we are interconnected and interdependent co-creators with all that is living.